So, if you just saw the thumbnail, you're probably wondering how on earth I could feel awful when I believe I look pretty good in that shape. Now, that image was from about 2 years ago, and I felt awful at that time, right? And this was because, well, firstly, for context, I was in a bulking phase, but I was eating relatively clean. At the time, I wasn't eating that much processed foods, but there were just a few problems that I was dealing with. And the reason I felt so rubbish at the time is I always had a lot of bloating and always had a lot of brain fog. And this made just, well, everyday living pretty miserable, pretty slow. But even when I'm trying to work on the things I want to work on, it also made that pretty miserable as well. And this was primarily because, well, obviously I was in a bulking phase, so I was having lots and lots of carbs at this time. And this was before I was on a more animal based diet of sort of meat, eggs, fruit, and just other sort of animal products. And I would have lots, and obviously in that sort of period a few years ago, I would have lots of pasta, rice, bread, like those sort of things, and grains and such. And yeah, sure, don't get me wrong, this definitely helped with bulking, right? And it did somewhat increase my strength in the gym. But at the end of the day, I felt really deflated. And that was really frustrating because I sort of saw my sort of physique and the health I was in. I was like, well, I feel like I should like look and feel good, but I don't feel good. And that is pretty much why I made the transition eventually to a more animal based diet, which is lower on the carbs, but higher in terms of fats and protein. Now, I want to just say that this was a decision I decided to make just simply from how I was feeling. I decided to experiment it. It was more so a case of right. Well, I've seen this sort of diet online. I know you might be familiar with things like carnivore and such. I never did do carnivore. I just went straight to sort of animal based, and that made a really big difference. It made a really big difference because it allowed me to lean down a little bit, a lot, but it also allowed me just to get a lot more mental clarity back and really better focus on the stuff I'm doing. And that was a really interesting turning point for me because I realized so much of the stuff that we eat nowadays or just take in our body doesn't have to just be food, affects how we think and feel, right? How we feel. Because if you're like, I mean, if you know that the stuff you're eating is processed stuff, and by processed stuff, I mean like, is it actual food or was it made somewhere? Like, is the ingredient label like two or three, or is it about 20? That's what I mean. Because if you're eating that stuff, which I know, like when I was younger, I used to eat things like crisps. I used to eat sort of, whatever nice bar it might have been or whatever. And this is the sort of stuff which is just gonna deflate your energy and it's just not gonna make you feel good at all. And it's just such a big distinction because I genuinely don't know now, like now in this position, I genuinely don't know how people can wake up every day, eat the food they eat, feel pretty rubbish all the time, and not realize or even question that maybe it is because of the food they're eating, right? And initially I thought, right, well, maybe I'm just not sleeping well, or perhaps this is just a normal thing. And turns out it's not, right? And sure, sometimes you're going to feel a bit tired, but I realized that, yeah, a lot of it is just the stuff you're taking in. So, for example, the type of foods I'm eating now, I'm having steak, I'm having eggs. I think I have like 5 eggs a day or something. I have mince, I have avocado, I'll have sort of apples and oranges and such in terms of fruits. I'll have things like cheese, butter, beef tallow, like to cook stuff with, and that sort of thing, right? And that's been really, really useful for me. Now, honestly speaking, I'm not going to necessarily say you should or shouldn't do whatever. I think the thing you should be doing if you're not feeling as good at the moment is experimenting, right? It's just experimenting and figuring out, okay, what foods are best. Now, I know some people look at carnivore and do carnivore for a short period, and then they like to reintroduce certain foods to figure out perhaps what it is that maybe their body can or can't tolerate. For me, I just went straight to animal based, which is just meat, animal products and like a few fruits and a bit of raw honey and that sort of stuff. I mean, I'm sure if you've seen Paul Saladino around, that's pretty much the diet I follow, and I sort of really like the sort of approach that he sort of has with that as well. But overall, I think I just want to really share this because although, sure, just having perhaps maybe a good looking physique on the outside doesn't mean you're going to feel as good, perhaps mentally or physically on the inside as well. And so I think something that I really looked at was focusing on, right, how do I feel? How many ingredients are in the food that I'm eating? And just generally speaking, is the stuff I'm putting into my body actual food? Like is it actual food, right? Look at the label. Like I find, especially in the UK, it's so difficult to find something from any sort of supermarket that has like two or three ingredients. But really, really be conscious of that because a lot of the stuff that people are putting into their bodies nowadays and stuff I was really wasn't natural and really wasn't good for my body. So really consider that and ask yourself those questions and let me know if you've experienced or still experience things like brain fog or things like bloating. I'd love to sort of have a chat, but make those changes and I'll chat soon.